Chapter 3, the speaker. The speaker that comes with the kit will likely have a connector on the end of it. This is a JST-PH connector. It's different from the other connectors that are included with the kit, and it is smaller. I've already put on the board connector for it, and as I mentioned in the previous video, the keyed portion for the speaker can go on the front or the back. I don't believe the polarity is particularly important, but I like to maintain consistency so that the red wire will be on the left. You can use this, but the wire that comes with the speaker is particularly long and will take up a lot of space and be kind of ugly inside the brain box. So you can coil it up and compress it and try not to bend it at corners like a sharp bend. But coiling it up and putting a rubber band around it will be fine to keep it in place if you want to use the original connector, which will work fine on the board. If you'd rather, I am still including a shorter set of wires and pre-pinned wires for the XH connectors to use, and that's what I'm going to do now. And by the way, if you want to shorten this, if you want to keep this smaller connector and shorten it, you can cut off and splice the wire, cut a large portion off so that in the end you only have about 4 inches of length. And this right now I think is almost, I don't know, 9 inches or a foot. Yeah, it's probably closer to a foot, and you don't need all that down in the brain box. It's just going from the center speaker a couple inches over to the circuit board. So right now I'm going to cut off this wire per the steps, kind of close to per the steps in the build guide, and going to cut this off. I say about 1 inch from the housing, maybe 2 inches. You want to leave enough to make it easier to work with. And just snip it off there, and so we snipped that wire off. We're going to get that out of the way. Try to keep the workspace a little bit clean. I'm just using a blade here, hobby knife blade, to try to split the wires since they're bundled together. Just give it a little split to get that started and then pull them apart. There we go. Okay, pulled it apart all the way to the housing. That's fine. Next thing I'm going to do is use a wire stripper and strip off about 1/4 inch. In this automatic stripper, yeah, it'll still reach. I probably try doing both of these at the same. No, okay, they want to go in different directions. Yeah. So I'll just do one at a time. There it comes off. And as I've mentioned in the past, I do like to strip, flux, and tin. I always do these with the stripped wires, is flux and tin them. So then when it comes time to actually solder them to their target, it'll be easier, much easier, and it'll go faster. So I've just got my paste flux here, and I'm just going to dip those wires into the paste flux and heat up the iron, give it a little tip clean, get a little solder on there. And there's my beep. I'm going to tin the tip a little bit. And then I'm just going to hold the tip with the solder on it just at the wire. As you can see, it changes color. And now these things will be tinned. And they'll take to the weld a lot better. And next I'm going to get, let's see, what connector? I'm going to do the dark connector first, the dark side. Get it in my helping hands. You might have articulated helping hands. I kind of jump around between which ones I use depending on the project. And now I'm also going to cut off about 4 inches, as in the instructions, about 4 inches from the pinned end of these leads that came with the kit. So do not cut the pinned ends off, or you're going to have a little more difficulty. So here's a tape measure, and I'm just going to go 4 inches. Mark the wire with my fingers and use a little cut. All right, I'm going to save those leads for later because those make really good jumpers when you do the light jig. And like before, I'm just going to get both of these in there at the same time. I'm leaving if you're using automatics like these, I like to leave the marker at the same distance if I'm going to splice 2 sets of wires so that they overlap just right. So strip, twist, and tin. So there's the twisting. I'm trying to do this on camera, but my space is limited. Twist. And I'm just going to poke them into the paste like that. The flux facilitates the solder running into the wires. And I found with wires, some will take solder, some won't. And I don't have patience to heat it properly, so let me heat that up a little more solder. There we go. And do the other one. Now the strands, this is stranded wire, so now the strands will hold together fine, which is what facilitates the bond. I know it's going to go all blurry while I'm doing this. And let me put on my old man glasses so I can get these guys lined up. I'm just getting them lined up in the helping hand so they're really close together. Oops, almost forgot. Before you do the solder, I think these the sleeves, the heat shrink, will slip on from the pinned end. It'll slip over the pinned end, but as a matter of habit, it's a better practice to so you don't forget the next time when it doesn't slip over the other end, to just go ahead and slip this on there now before the soldering, and then put it in place. There we go. And this is the tricky part with the helping hands, getting it lined up. But after it's lined up, it's pretty easy peasy. And I'm going to clean that tip. Get some solder on there. In this case, I like to hold the iron on the bottom side. And hopefully that's enough. Let's see if I can zoom in here and see if we spot the weld. The weld's right there. Yeah, that's not bad. That's close enough together that I've got a long bond between the two different wires, and the sleeve will also slip over that joint. Before I do that other joint, or before I do the sleeve, the heat shrink, I'm going to go ahead and get the other wire taken care of, so I can just do the sleeve at the same time for both of these guys. Yeah, get it lined up. Get it lined up. I could have probably used a longer length of overlap there, or stripped it a little longer for both of them. And I like to put the solder on the iron. There we go. Okay, well, that's ugly as heck. Yeah. And just get them lined up again, apply the heat. And let's see how that works. Let's turn it. I can't see from my side. I don't know if the sleeve will slip over that. And I forgot to put it on. So follow your own instructions, right? And do as I do. Okay. There we go. So it still slips over the other end for these bare pins. So if you forget that, it's not the end of the world. And it can all be redone anyways. So now I'll see if it slips over that ugly joint. Yep. It goes over that just fine. And then I'll get the other one over that. That's great. And now I like to use my iron. I have a preset on here for a lower temperature. I like to use the tip of the iron. I'm going to scrape that off while I'm at it. I like to use the iron tip to shrink the heat shrink. And just kind of hold. I'm going to use one finger to kind of hold it in place over the joint. And then I don't use the very tip of the iron. It's still cooling down. I don't use the very tip because it's got solder on there, and I don't want metal on my, I don't want that solder on the outside of my heat shrink. So I just backed off the temperature down to about -230. I set for this. And I'm just running it along the underside, running it along the top side. You can use a lighter, or you can use a reflow gun, a heat gun. But I don't like to introduce all that noise and heat flying around. So that one heat shrink is done. Let's do the other one. Again, I'm going to kind of hold the end of one end of the heat shrink in place so I can rub the iron around on one side of it without the heat shrink sliding around. I mean, once you get enough over the joint, you see it's a little bulbous there. That's enough to hold it into place. And then I'm just gonna kind of get the ends. Try not to touch the wire. The bare wire insulation itself, because we don't want to melt that back. But if we give it a little tug on the heat shrink, I can feel that's not going anywhere, and all of the weld is covered up by the heat shrink, so we don't have to worry about any shorts later on in the build. And now we've got what we need to then apply the connector housing. The connector housing in this case is okay to put on right after this for the speaker because it's not going through any channels or anything during the build. And here we go. We've got the pins of the speaker underneath. We've got those pins, and we've got the female connector that it goes in. So I'm going to put the slip from holding the connector housing with the opening at the top for the wires. I'm going to put the red wire on the left side and make sure the spine is at the back. Somebody was doing a test assembly per the instructions, put it with the spine in the front, and I kept wondering why the connector was not slipping in at the last minute during final assembly. And see, black is on the right side of the keyed portion, and the spine is at the back. And I felt a little click there. And if we turn it over, you'll see that with the metal from the back of the pins, you can see it all the way in there. If it needs to be redone, or you do it backwards for some reason, you can slip the end of some tweezers, very narrow tweezers in there, or a needle pick or something. Basically press down on that portion that's exposed in there, and you'll be able to snug the wire out, hopefully. It takes a little practice, which is why we try to get it right in the first place.